The year is 1888, New York Harbor. On a foggy early morning, the cargo ship the Providence is completing its final preparations for a long voyage. The harbor on America's east coast is as bustling as usual, but something feels different this time. A deep sense of anticipation lingers behind the ship's steel doors. As dock workers bustle around the ship, a strange darkness is visible in the sea. The heavy atmosphere in the air, though everything seems normal, triggers a deep subconscious fear. Captain Samuel Blackwell, an experienced captain who has spent many years at sea, stands at the helm. Calm and resolute, he is a man of certainty. But in the past few days, he has felt a growing unease. This journey should have been just another routine voyage. However, something feels amiss. The ocean has always held mysteries, but this time, an inner feeling warns him that something else awaits them. While the crew prepares for departure, Margaret Thompson, sitting on the deck of the ship and gazing out at the sea, feels a strange sense of unease. Margaret, in her 30s, is a free-spirited woman who has sailed many times before, but this journey feels different. A certain inexplicable fear is building inside her. Margaret has always had a strange bond with the ocean since childhood, but lately, she has been experiencing disturbing dreams about the sea. One night, unable to sleep, Margaret found herself tossing and turning in her bed when she once again had the same dream. A misty veil, darkened ocean, and a ship lost among towering waves. A sunken ship. Vengeful spirits rose from the ocean's depths, their figures moving toward the surface. One ghostly figure winks at her, as if trying to convey a message. Margaret wakes up before she can see the ghost clearly. Her eyes, full of fear, gleam in the stormy night. These nightmares only deepen Margaret's connection to the ocean, giving her an eerie sense of foreboding. Was it just a woman's intuition? Or was there truly something wrong? As Margaret struggles to make sense of it all, one morning, she decides to speak to Captain Blackwell about the strange darkness of the sea and the mysterious sound she heard. Captain Blackwell, aware of Margaret's growing anxiety, is skeptical of her concerns. He knows the ocean's unknown nature and its eerie qualities. But in an attempt to calm her, he gently says, "Margaret, the ocean sometimes grows angry. But beyond the legendary, now only a mystery, dark passages lie hidden. There are things we don't know, of course, but these are really just games of our imagination." Margaret listens to the captain's words and feels a bit more at ease. But deep down, there's something about the sea that won't let her relax. The Providence's route would take them across the peaceful waters of the Atlantic Ocean. However, within Margaret, a silent fear is growing. Every second that brings them closer to the deep waters makes it feel as though they are inching closer to the ocean's dark secret. That day, everything seemed normal until something was noticed. The ocean, in a brief moment, began to darken in an unnatural way. The water around the ship was suddenly black, as if night had fallen unexpectedly. The crew stood motionless on deck, their faces grim. The sky had also darkened, with clouds surrounding the ship. While it wasn't a storm, the darkening of the sea seemed like a forewarning of some danger. As Margaret turned to walk to the other side of the ship, she began to hear a strange sound. Her ears ringing, she turned around but saw nothing. However, her eyes noticed something odd. The sky had turned a color that seemed to come from another world. As the ship sailed forward, the deepening sea seemed to slow them down, creating an atmosphere of waiting. Margaret felt a wave of fear rise inside her. With each passing moment, she sensed that something beneath the dark ocean was moving closer to them. Captain Blackwell, however, insisted that the darkening of the sea was a natural phenomenon and not a cause for alarm. But Margaret knew this unease meant something more. Captain Blackwell instructed the crew to set their course immediately. But just then, something strange happened on deck. A kind of inscription appeared, seemingly carved into the planks of the ship by the ocean breeze. "The abyss calls" was etched into the wood. The crew stared at the writing in silence. But Margaret felt deep within her that this was a warning. Captain Blackwell, a bit perplexed, decided not to cause any panic and said, "These are just the ocean's oddities. Let's continue." The crew hesitated, but reluctantly moved forward, while Margaret's fear grew with each passing minute. By evening, the darkening of the sea had gradually become a sign of an impending storm. Margaret found herself alone on deck, the strange sounds of the ocean echoing in her ears. Suddenly, a scream pierced the air, and Margaret was pulled roughly downward. The ship lurched, shaken by a giant wave. A loud reverberation rose from the ocean. It was as if the ocean was shouting at them. Turn back. What was happening in the ocean? What should the crew do? Margaret, listening to her intuition, understood that this journey would not end well. By the end of this chapter, the Providence and its crew are plunging deeper into the dark depths of the ocean. Had Margaret's fear been just a result of her subconscious warnings, or was the curse of the abyss truly awaiting them? The Providence had been sailing peacefully through the ocean's tranquil waters for some time. But suddenly, the sky darkened, and the color of the sea deepened. The ocean, wrapped in an unusual silence, seemed to hold an unexplained unease that grew inside every member of the crew. Even while going about their duties, the crew felt an inexplicable emptiness. A deep, instinctual fear seemed to grow with each step they took. Captain Samuel Blackwell, despite no technical issues with the ship's journey, began to pay more attention to his intuition. His experience was shaped not only by the wind's direction and wave heights, but also by his instincts. But something was wrong. Something was not right. One night, a terrifying scream echoed from the front of the ship. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. The crew immediately couldn't identify the source of the scream, but something had sharply changed. The ship, which had seemed to glide smoothly over the calm ocean, now found itself tossed by rising waves. The waves, now growing to colossal proportions, began crashing against the Providence's hull. Captain Blackwell felt his heart race as he saw the abnormally large waves. Something was terribly wrong. In an instant, the sky turned pitch black. The sea rose and fell at an alarming speed. As the massive waves struck the Providence's hull, the ship began to sway violently. The crew, in a panic, tried to keep the ship steady. With every wave, the ship shook, and the ominous sound of creaking wood could be heard. Margaret, frozen with fear, stood motionless on the deck. Edward, stepping forward, found the waves so powerful that the ship almost flipped over. Captain Blackwell realized they were caught in a full-blown storm. "This storm is not normal," he muttered. His eyes were wide with fear as he realized they were being pulled toward the storm's center. It was as though the storm was a creature tearing apart the ship, pulling it from the ocean's black depths. The crew could feel the same unease they had sensed earlier growing stronger, but no one knew exactly what was happening. As the storm raged on, the ship's structure was put to the test. Suddenly, a huge wave engulfed the ship, and the crew members, in terror, screamed as they were thrown into the sea. The waters swept them away, one by one. Amid the crashing waves, Margaret caught a glimpse of something, an eerie, ghostly silhouette. As the storm intensified, the silhouette vanished. Was it a hallucination? Margaret rubbed her eyes, unsure. As the storm raged on, the ship's entire structure was being tested. Captain Blackwell had lost his bearings, and with every passing moment, the ship's integrity was further challenged. A massive wave struck the side of the ship, causing it to lurch violently. Everyone was helpless in the face of the storm's power. The crew, fighting for survival, did everything they could. But something was wrong. It was as if the Providence itself was decaying. The ship seemed to be pulled into the depths of the ocean. In just a few minutes, some of the crew had disappeared, and others barely managed to survive by hiding in the ship's corners. Margaret and Edward were two of the few survivors. The ocean's power left them unsure of what to do next. A single wave was strong enough to capsize the ship. The water was flooding in quickly. The crew was scattered, searching desperately for one another, trying to help each other. But the storm's force was so overwhelming that no one could reach anyone else. Another wave swallowed the ship whole, and soon after, the ship was drowned in a dark, cold silence. Margaret and Edward searched the deck for the remaining survivors. But something was wrong. There was a feeling of disappearance in the ocean. The crew had vanished into the dark depths. The ship was abandoned, and a strange void had taken its place. The eerie sounds of the ocean echoed in Margaret's ears. After some time, the storm subsided, but everything was lost. The few surviving members of the Providence managed to cling to life in the calm ocean. However, Margaret and Edward soon realized they were trapped by the ocean itself. The sea seemed to be pulling them in. The ship now drifted silently like a ghost ship. Margaret felt that the moment had come to uncover the dark secret of the river's depths. The silence left behind by the storm only intensified the terror within them. The ocean could at any moment transform into a monstrous beast. But as they descended deeper into the depths, Margaret began to sense something stirring within her. The lost souls in the ocean's dark waters knew the truth of the ship's past. They could no longer delay the secrets of the abyss calls. Margaret turned her eyes to the darkness, whispering, "They are watching us." Edward looked at her in fear. "Who?" he asked. Margaret did not answer. The darkness she felt within her was far greater. The ocean was pulling them helplessly toward a certain point. The remaining survivors of the ship struggled to reach land, but it was as though land never existed. The crew members lost in the ocean, the sunken ships, had left behind a dark legacy. As Margaret and Edward moved forward toward the journey's end, the ocean hid a dark secret. The crew had vanished, but something was moving in the ocean's dark waters. As the abyss drew near, the journey was heading toward an inescapable dead end. For a week, Margaret and Edward continued their search for the missing crew of the Providence. The ocean grew wilder each day, and like the forgotten ships of the past, the ominous traces of lost spirits became more apparent. However, nothing had yet been as terrifying as the discovery of a sunken ship's wreck. One morning, as the sun had fully risen, Margaret received a message. The wreck of the Providence had begun to surface. The remnants of the ship were floating on the ocean, a ghostly apparition above the waters. A voice from the depths of the ocean filled Margaret with dread. When Edward told Margaret they had found the ship, she paused. A deep, inner fear gripped her, yet at the same time, unanswered questions pulled her toward this adventure. As Margaret stepped toward the ocean, she knew she would have to face her fears. A secret lost in the vastness of the ocean was closing in on her. At first glance, the abyss appeared as a haunting reminder of another time. The ship's grand sails had been fused with the ocean's depths, rising from the water like the remnants of a ghost ship. The water around the ship had darkened, with black seaweed clinging to its hull. As Margaret and Edward approached the ship, they immediately sensed the dark secret within. The ship stood alone, massive and abandoned, but a feeling lingered. Something was watching them. Inside the ship, the setting seemed oddly arranged. Margaret and Edward stepped onto the sunken vessel, their hearts racing with a mixture of fear and curiosity. As they ventured deeper, an ominous force from the ocean's depths seemed to draw nearer. The inside of the ship was silent, but this silence was unsettling. In the dark rooms, they came across the bodies of the lost crew members. However, there was something strange. The bodies were untouched by decay, almost as if they were still alive. Margaret and Edward froze for a moment, their hearts pounding. How had these bodies not decayed? When had they died? And when had they been abandoned? The spirits of the ocean must have been trapped aboard this ship. The eyes of the spirits stared at Margaret and Edward, filled with sorrow and pain. It was as if they wished to share the dark secrets of the past. Margaret slowly approached one of the corpses. When her gaze met the corpse's eyes, it slightly nodded its head. Then, a voice whispered in Margaret's ear, "Go back." the chilling echo mixed with the ocean's roar, filling the ship's interior. Edward immediately turned around, but he had missed something. The voices of the spirits rose from the depths of the ocean, calling, though no one understood exactly what was happening. As they moved deeper into the ship, Margaret and Edward found an ancient inscription. On the walls of the ship, worn by the sea but still readable, was a message. This writing revealed terrifying information about the abyss's past. "There is something you do not know about the ocean." This phrase sent shivers down their spines and deepened their investigation. The ocean was hiding something, concealing a secret. As Margaret read this inscription, she suddenly realized something. This ship was not just a sunken vessel, it was a pirate ship. The Abyss had once been one of the most fearsome pirate ships of its time. There was a curse upon the lost ships that sank to the ocean's depths, binding the souls of their crews in the Abyss. Over time, the Abyss had merged with the lost ships and souls, transforming into a monstrous entity buried in the deep ocean. The ship had once been connected to death and darkness. The pirates had left their souls in the ocean's depths, forever trapped in this curse. Margaret and Edward now wondered, how old is this curse really? The ship held the answer, but with every passing moment it pulled them deeper into its mysteries. Suddenly, a voice echoed from every corner of the ship. The cries of the spirits resonated, like an endless echo from the ocean's depths. Margaret and Edward began to feel the past, their senses overwhelmed by the presence of the spirits. One spirit whispered a voice that sent a chill through both of them. "Go back, or you will stay here." Edward, looking around in fear, said, "This ship is not abandoned. Something is waiting for us." As Margaret gazed into the eyes of the spirits, her heart began to race. "There's something here, something alive with us," she whispered. Both of them now realized that there was something more in the ocean's depths than just the abyss. A dark power was trying to pull them deeper into the abyss. Suddenly, everything shook. A wave violently rocked the ship. The ocean had transformed into a monster. Margaret closed her eyes, trying to face her inner fears. Edward, focused only on survival, knew what needed to be done. The ocean would not let them go. The spirits grew nearer, and a deeper secret from the ocean's darkness began to emerge. As Margaret and Edward delved deeper into the sunken ship, uncovering the eerie writings and confronting the terrifying spirits, they realized that the curse of the ocean was growing stronger. The abyss was no longer just a ship. It had become a place where the lost souls were imprisoned, a hellish realm that had merged with the deep sea. The hopeless cries of the spirits pulled Margaret and Edward deeper, and as the ocean's dark secret unfolded, both of them felt it closing in. The ocean watched them unceasingly, tracking every step they took. Margaret and Edward, having drawn closer to death, finally managed to step ashore after days of struggling to survive. For a week, they had been trying to stay alive, fleeing from the curse of a ship and an ominous past, hunted by spirits. But when they set foot on land, there was something they didn't notice at first. Everything was eerily quiet. The harbor was abandoned. There were no sailors, no sign of life. The air was still and cold. The town was strangely deserted, ghostly silent. It was the complete opposite of a peaceful environment. As Margaret walked through the town, the fear inside her grew once again. The old stone buildings by the river, shattered windows, and rusted iron were becoming increasingly disturbing with every passing second. Was this once a place full of life? She thought. With every step, she felt the passage of time and the disappearance of the town. Edward found the atmosphere of the town strange. Uneasy, he felt as though some dark force was watching them from every corner. The ocean seemed far behind, but the calls of spirits still echoed from the depths. As they ventured into the narrow streets, a cold wind from the ocean passed through them. The curse of the sea had somehow found its way to land. As Margaret and Edward ventured deeper into the town, they encountered old writings scratched into the walls of the abandoned buildings. Each one seemed to be a terrifying message left by the former inhabitants before they were swallowed by the ocean. The sea never forgets. The spirits return. Everything vanishes, but fear is eternal. Among these writings, an ancient symbol caught their attention. The same symbol had been found aboard the Abyss, the sunken ship. When Margaret examined the symbol, a deep chill ran through her. This symbol is from the curse of the Providence. This town shared the same fate as the lost ships, she said. The ocean was leaving its mark not only on the sea but on land as well. The town had been consumed by the ocean years ago, and since then, the souls of its residents had been trapped in this place, unable to escape, like the spirits of the sunken ships. However, Margaret could feel that the spirits were not only here. With every step, she felt them drawing closer. There was something waiting for them. Suddenly, as night fell, the dark town became even more terrifying. The town was silent, but Margaret and Edward felt the presence of a being at every corner. The ocean seemed to be watching every stone, every corner of the town. It was as if the ocean had carried its anger here. The cries of spirits echoed off the walls of the town. When they reached the highest point of the town, the sky was completely dark. A sound rose from the dark depths of the ocean. Both characters could hear their heartbeats. In an instant, everything went black. Fear entered every cell of their bodies. The ocean seemed to be trying to pull them in. The spirits were following them. Suddenly, there was an explosion of light from all directions in the town. The spirits had intoxicated the town. Everything became a blur. A terrifying scream echoed. Margaret and Edward could hear the screams coming from the heart of the town. The spirits of the town, unable to escape the curse of the abyss, had become trapped here. The town had become a grave. The ocean had returned all the lost souls. Margaret and Edward clung to each other in terror. The ocean was pulling them once more. The spirits were watching them, drawing closer with every step. There was no escape now. The town, once inhabited by people, had become the tomb of spirits from the ocean's depths. With every step they took, the ocean whispered something to them. The ocean never forgets. As the spirits followed Margaret and Edward, a scream rose from the silence of the town. The ocean was getting closer with every passing moment, claiming its lost souls once again. Margaret and Edward were trapped among the lost ships and the spirits of the sunken world. The curse of the ocean was now following them and would not let them go. There was nowhere left to escape. Margaret and Edward were lost within the endless fear of the ocean. In the end, the ocean left behind nothing but the abandoned remains of the town. All the souls were trapped there, forever. The story of Margaret and Edward remained as only a memory of the lost ships and the spirits swallowed by the depths of the ocean. But one thing was certain. The ocean would continue to grow, and that fear would never fade.